What's your pleasure, sir? Hello YouTube, I'm sure there are some of you out there who are at least somewhat familiar with this little artifact. It's known by a variety of names depending on what lore you happen to subscribe to. To some, it's known after its creator, the toy maker Le Marchand, simply as Le Marchand's box. In more poetic circles, it is called the Lament Configuration, and it is rumoured to be a key to certain doorways, behind which lurk the pleasures of either heaven or hell. The box first makes its appearance in the novella The Hellbound Heart by one of my favourite authors, Clive Barker, which details how it falls into the hands of a man named Frank Cotton, who has, according to his own words, gone to the utmost extremes of available experience, and at the beginning of the story is seeking out more esoteric means of getting his rocks off. That's where this comes in. Having found the box, he solves it with the right appetites and intentions. That's very important according to the lore. One must be of the right frame of mind and loins, it seems, in order to get this thing to work correctly. Unfortunately, his definition of pleasure and that of the things that this summons are somewhat different. It brings him into the company of beings known as the Cenobites. And the Cenobites are ageless experts, according to the words of their creator, ageless experts in the art of refined pleasure and even more refined pain, and of blurring the lines between the two so that all experience is welcome. Now in the book, they are somewhat more fluttering and ambiguous than they are in the movie. They're also much more loquacious. They speak much more. In fact, they don't just take Frank as they do in the movie. They ask him what he wants, and he answers. He asks them for pleasure, and they give it to him. Just not in the manner to which he is thus far accustomed. They tell him that there are conditions of the nerve endings that are beyond anything he can experience on this plane or even imagine. And thus they give him a taste of that. There are some wonderful descriptions in the opening pages of the book about how every sensation, down to grains of dust in the air scraping against his skin, becomes enhanced and intensified to unendurable degrees. And then they introduce him to something new, being torn apart and reconstituted again and again and again, always in new configurations, new states of the flesh. And that is their art, the Cenobites. It's what they've done to themselves and what they've done to countless others before. They are high priests of the Order of the Gash. They have made a lifestyle and an aesthetic of undoing their own bodies and stitching them back together. As such, how they appear in both the book and the movie is rather interesting. They are at once horrific and beautiful. In the movie in particular, the aesthetic of the Cenobites is very, very interesting. They are disturbing and to a degree repulsive, yet at the same time distressingly attractive. They marry certain elements that create something that has never really been seen in horror before or since. They have a papal quality to them, mixed in with a punkish and sadomasochistic vibe that is quite glorious to behold, especially when the leader of the Cenobites, the self-appointed high priest, colloquially known as Pinhead, speaks. Played by the actor Doug Bradley, he's invested with this wistful, weary melancholy. In terms of his ancestry in the annals of horror, I suppose his closest ancestor would be Frankenstein's monster, whom in the book Frankenstein shares his capacity for poetic self-expression. He's very, very different from other horror movie icons of the era, the mid to late 80s, such as Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, or Michael Myers, in that he is not exclusively an icon of horror. He and the philosophy that he represents are perversely attractive. And that's the part of the genius of Hellraiser and the Hellbound Heart. It says to you, you know that there is something rather vile about this, but you want it. You're attracted to this. Why would you keep coming back otherwise? And in the movie in particular, this is hit home via the use of extremely graphic scenes of bodily mutilation, but that are nevertheless rather beautiful in terms of the way they are shot and the intricacy of the pain that is inflicted. The movie is very, very different from the Gorno or torture porn films that one sees today, which are essentially strings of attempts to shock. There's very little else to them. Hellraiser has these beautiful lingering shots over the pain that is portrayed, and there seems to be an underlying subtext of poetry or philosophy. It's trying to tell you something, or to make you realise something about yourself and your appetite. Appetite is certainly the recurring theme in Hellraiser. What is pleasure? What is pain? How and why do we distinguish between the two? Is there a point where those definitions blur? And also, can excess, carnal excess, lead to transfiguration, transcendence, the becoming of something more? Now, both book and movie are early steps in Clive Barker's career, and thus are flawed jewels. The movie itself was only ever intended to be a glorified student work. Its budget was initially horrendously low, and even at its height never really achieved the kind of standards that were being funneled into the larger blockbuster picks of the time. And unfortunately this is evident in certain scenes and certain effects now. There are also problems in that the idiot distributors decided to dub over all of the Liverpool accents. The film is set in Liverpool with American ones, which jars horrendously. Nevertheless, it's a very, very interesting, intense, powerful, graphic, and perversely fascinating film. And it is certainly one of my favourites. Simply because even after many, many years of exposure, I've watched the film many times since I was a child. And I've read the novella many times over as well. Even at this point, it retains a power that no other horror film I've come across has, and that is not the power to terrify, but to leave you feeling soiled.